Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really happy to give this presentation and super happy to accept a variety of answers. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So as Kyla said, I'm Audrey Menninga. I am the director for the Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network. Okay, I need you to advance the slide though, bud. 1 second here. Okay, there we go. All right, so we are a CISMA, what's called a Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. Please, if you ever have any questions about an acronym that I use, I try to be very good about saying what the acronyms are, but in the environmental field, we use an acronym for anything that we possibly can. And so we don't own any land like a conservancy would, but we do work with a variety of partners. So you can see a list of our partners here. Most of these people sit on our board as well. We are a nonprofit, so we are a registered 501c3. And so we have a board, and most of these people do sit on our board. We do cover 4 counties. So we cover Manistee, Benzie, Leelanau, and Grand Traverse, that nice little northwestern corner. And so if you've ever been outside of Michigan, you might have heard this referred to as a CWMA, which is called a Cooperative Weed Management Area. If you've been on the East Coast, New York particularly calls them PRISMs, Partnerships for Regional Invasive Species Management. And so that one's a little bit longer. And also not as what I thought I had heard the first time I ever heard the word prisons, which I thought they were saying prisons. And I was like, why are we talking about prisons when we're talking about invasive species? But it is prisms. So Michigan is a little bit unique compared to the rest of the United States, and that is that all counties in Michigan are covered by a CISMA. So you can see the map here. So if you're ever outside of our service area, there is a CISMA that represents your area. If you ever want to know which CISMA that is, you can go here to michiganinvasives.org. And all of the CISMAs are a little bit different. For the most part, we're very similar in the fact that we all are very partner focused. We're all working with a variety of different groups. As you saw from the last slide, we work with everybody from the federal government, from the Forest Service and Sleeping Bear Dunes, to the state government with the DNR, to our nonprofit partners, to the municipalities, to the conservation districts, to private landowners. And so CISMAs are often focusing across that wide range of groups. Sizes can be a bit different. You'll notice that there's a lot of ground covered by very few CISMAs in the UP, whereas Oakland County down here has just one county under their CISMA, and they deal with a lot more maybe than the UP CISMAs deal with. So it's kind of a, pick and choose with that. And so we have different priority species. Again, obviously the UP is going to be looking at different species than Oakland County would be. And we do some different programs as well. And really, again, that partnership is the biggest thing. We don't own any land. And so doing invasive species work means working with a lot of people. And the reason that we do all of that work is because habitat matters. And it obviously matters for our healthy ecosystems. We have beautiful, healthy ecosystems up here for the most part. And it matters outside of that as well, because we're a really big ecotourism area. And so people are coming up here to go out hiking and see Lake Michigan and see these beautiful forests and these wide, understories full of trillium. And they don't really want to come up and see like an understory full of garlic mustard or honeysuckle or autumn olive. They can see that downstate. They come up here to see the really beautiful landscapes. And we also often hear, everybody's familiar with those connections between monarchs and milkweed, but a healthy ecosystem is a lot more than that. We have so many different pollinators. You can see this really cute bumblebee here sitting on top of this coreopsis. And so what we're really looking for is making sure that we're making those connections through the entire ecosystem with all of our different pollinators. So this is some of the other pollinators that have that same kind of connection that monarchs have with milkweed. One of my favorites is the double-toothed prominent, which you can see here. That has co-evolved with elms in order to disguise itself to look like an elm leaf to try and avoid predation. Similarly, down here, we have our sphinx moth. It also has co-evolved with Virginia creeper. All these little kind of gross looking things hanging off of it are to make it look like it's a Virginia creeper stem with a root system coming off of it, because that's what the Virginia creeper uses to anchor itself. We also have this really iconic swallowtail. Um, Also needs spicebush and sassafras in order to complete its life cycle. It's kind of wild to find out how many bugs and caterpillars and such a brood needs to, or a robin would need to raise a brood of little baby robins. And so, trying to help promote that habitat is really important to keep the whole chain going for a healthy ecosystem. And then when we're also looking at this, we're also looking, at we have the woody plants here ranked by their ability to support butterfly and moth species. And again, keep in mind, this is only butterfly and moth species. The oak tree is commonly known as the tree of life because its ability to support so many different insects and butterflies and moths. So you can see here, it is can support 534 different species. And the reason that I'm pointing this out is because a lot of times when we talk about invasive species, we get a question of, well, something will learn to eat it eventually, right? And the answer to that is maybe. And so here is a list of some species that are found in North America that are not native to North America. And this is with their herbivores supported in their homeland versus in North America. The one that you might be the most familiar with would be invasive Phragmites. That's what's pictured over here in this with this other person that is a normal-sized human. Phragmites can grow very tall. And so in its homeland, it can support about 170 different species. It's been here for, we believe, obviously we don't have an exact date of entry, but we believe that it's been here for over 300 years, and it can still only support 5 species. And I do want to put like an asterisk on that, which is that it can support 5 species. It isn't their preferred food or shelter. Oftentimes it's what they have. And so they use it because they have to. And then before we get into invasive species too much here, I do want to talk a little bit about what is invasive. So the formal definition is going to be a non-native species that harms people, the environment, or the economy. And so, oftentimes we will have non-native species in our landscapes that aren't invasive. What we're looking for is that second step, that part that harms people, the environment, or the economy. And obviously, we have a lot of invasive species in the United States, and all people who are dealing with invasive species have to prioritize things because they're limited by their funding, they're limited by their time, their materials. And so we can't just, unfortunately, go out and treat every invasive species. We wish we could. There's lots of other people who also wish that we could, but sadly we can't. And so we use what's called an invasive species curve. And so down here we have introduction, which is going to be where you first have a species that has escaped or has gotten, taken off in ballast water, such as like where zebra mussels came from. So that first introduction into the ecosystem. We're getting up to detection here, which is where you start seeing things scattered around. You may not think it's too big of a deal because you've just seen a couple of plants. And then you get up to the very top with the widespread awareness where you see it everywhere. So really for that one, the best one example we have is autumn olive. Autumn olive is along every roadside. It's along every forest edge and barren field. You see it pretty much everywhere. What we're really looking for when we start to take on a project is we're really looking for this detection. If we're going on a species-focused invasive species management, we're looking for that detection when it's pretty low, where we can probably get it under control. Maybe even we can think about eradication depending on how close we are with that detection. When we get up to that widespread awareness, we're starting to get into, things that may not be super easy. It's just everywhere. We just don't have the time to do it. The times where we're treating those widespread awareness tend to be when we're doing a project-based focus. And so we are, looking to treat this one garlic mustard plant because treating, all my picture is cut off, but you can see treating all of that is going to take, a week at least. as opposed to treating this one garlic mustard plant, which is 5 minutes of going out to grab that plant and pull it out of the ground. Also, want to throw out a quick things that are not invasive that we get a lot of calls about. Corn sometimes looks like some invasive grasses that we have. It is an agricultural crop. It is obviously not a native plant, but it is an agricultural crop. Poison ivy is actually native. I do understand why people want to treat it because I also am allergic to it. Keeping it out of areas where you're regularly going, totally cool. We totally understand. But it does actually provide some berries that birds and other animals will eat. Riverbank grape vines, honestly, are native vines I get calls about all the time because they are aggressive, which is what vines do best. They grow, especially growing on top of things. But riverbank grape, also native. And then we get a lot of horsetail and scouring rush, which sometimes people mistake it for Phragmites. It is a native species. It does provide a lot of habitat, also does grow very densely. If you're looking to get rid of it, I wish you the best of luck. Horsetail is actually, if you go back down, its genetics was around when dinosaurs were around, when ferns were like 10 feet tall. So it survived that much. It's probably going to survive you as well. So again, if you're looking to treat that, very much good luck. So as I mentioned before, not all non-natives are going to be invasive. So for about every 100 non-native species introduced, 10 are going to naturalize and one will become invasive. So when we talk about naturalized, we're talking about if it is escaping, it's not causing any problems in the environment really, or it's staying where you've put it. So I usually use the example of hydrangeas, which you can see growing right here. Hydrangeas are dramatic plants. If it's over 75 degrees and they haven't had water in the last 24 hours, they wilt. So they're probably not going to escape anytime soon. But what you can see here is actually called Dame's rocket. And that was a ornamental plant that was planted in gardens. It is the same family as garlic mustard. And so it can escape very readily, grow in the forest understories, comes in a few different colors, sometimes multiple colors on one stem. And it does look like our native phlox. So we have a few different species of native phlox. The easiest way to tell the difference between the two of them, and I was very grumpy when I first learned this because I struggled with this for years before somebody told me this, but Dame's rocket has 4 petals because Dame has 4 letters in the name. Phlox has 5 petals because there's 5 letters in the name Phlox. Super easy way to tell the difference between them. Hopefully that helps you guys as well. And then we get a lot of questions sometimes because ornamental invasive species tend to be one of the biggest. They make up about 47% of the invasive species that that people are managing in the United States. So we get a lot of questions about how you can tell which plants are going to be safe. We usually recommend that if you see a new plant in the nursery that you haven't seen before or nobody's heard about before, we recommend maybe avoiding that for, 5 or so years just to see what it's going to do. And you can always check purchases against invasive species list. We have one on our website. MIPIN, which is the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, also has one. We always recommend people check out the scientific name on it because sometimes common names are pretty loosey-goosey. So check out those scientific names on them to make sure. And part of the reason that ornamental invasive species are such a big pathway of invasive species is because when we pick those ornamental species to go into landscapes, we're looking for things that have the same traits as an invasive species. They can handle a wide range of temperatures, so they can be sold across a lot of area. They can tolerate a bunch of different types of soil. They can, the first thing to put out a flower and leaves in the spring, they're putting out big, showy berries. So a lot of times that we see a lot of overlap there. And that is why ornamentals are one of the biggest problems that we have. We also get a lot of people who will say things like, but I don't see it spreading in my yard. And so part of that is because a lot of times it's these cute little buggers that are the problem. They see a berry, and berries mean food, so they eat that berry, and then they will often fly away, and they'll poop that berry out somewhere else, and it becomes somebody else's problem. And so you'll often, won't see that. Or you'll see people who have a shrub in their yard that may be, like a Japanese barberry. Well, they're probably weed whipping or mowing around it. And that's going to limit its ability to spread that way. So we really like to point out that just because you don't see it spreading in your yard doesn't mean it's not spreading in somebody else's yard. We'll also just want to put a quick plug out for sterile varieties. Barberry, I know, has one. And there's several other ornamental species that say that they also have sterile varieties. And just want to throw a quick little plug out there that there has been some evidence showing that sterile varieties can actually, within 5 or so years, lose that sterility and they will become fertile again. So we usually just advocate staying away from those cultivars as well. A quick look at our top 12 species. So we picked these based on a long list. I think it took us probably 2 weeks to really fully go through all of this prioritization for species. We just recently did this in 2021 to relook at what we originally had a top 20 and realized 20 species was too many. We need to narrow that down and we need to pick the worst of them. So these are our top 12 least wanted species. And again, this is for our service area. So if you go outside our service area, it's going to be different for somebody else. So we've got baby's breath, which is very common on the dunes. I'm sure that if you follow with Benzie, you've seen us before out putting out our work bees on Alberta Beach to remove baby's breath. Barberry, Japanese and common, despite the name common barberry, it is not that common. It's actually very difficult to find. Blue lime grass is another one of those dune species. The glossy and common buckthorns are shrubs. Don't eat the berries. They're very dangerous for humans to eat. Calorie pear and its cultivars, Bradford and Cleveland pears. If you haven't seen one yet, you probably haven't been down in a downtown area. If you've ever walked down Front Street in the spring and seen all of the white flowering trees, all of those are calorie pear. Garlic mustard, one of those forest understory herbaceous species. Invasive honeysuckles, which you can usually find in the understory of the forest, growing as a shrub. Knotweeds, we have Japanese and giant knotweed. Bohemian knotweed is actually a hybrid between the two of them. You may know them as Michigan bamboo. That's another one of their common names. Invasive bittersweet, that common name might be changing to roundleaf bittersweet, so you might see me referring to it as roundleaf bittersweet in the rest of this slideshow. That is an ornamental vine. You may have seen those berries before in a lot of dried arrangements or wreaths. They're really popular for wreath because of that bright red berry. Invasive Phragmites is one that we work with along shorelines and in riparian areas. Same with purple loosestrife, beautiful purple flower. If you've been through Honor in the late summer, you'll often see them growing in the ditches there. And then Tree of Heaven is the last one that we have on there. A very fast growing tree, puts out really, really large leaflets. So those are our top 12 that we have. We don't actively manage all of those. We actively manage the knotweeds, bittersweet, and Phragmites. And obviously baby's breath, we work with the Regional Land Conservancy for Alberta Beach. But for the most part, we prioritize working with those 3 species. And you'll notice that there's a bunch of these circled. Those are all ornamental species that escaped cultivation. There are right now, I will throw out that there's a request for comments out from the state of Michigan through MDARD for comments on restricting some of these species, which would include Japanese barberry and all of its cultivars, the common and glossy buckthorns and all of its cultivars, calorie pear and all of its cultivars, and yes, those 4, yes. So those 4 are up for restriction. There's a couple up for prohibition, which would be water lettuce and water hyacinth, which are not on these lists. Those are also ornamental species as well. So some of the current programs that we're doing right now, we have our Go Beyond Beauty program. So that is a voluntary program to try and change the mindset of the communities away from some of that more traditional landscaping with things like barberry and English ivy, and to look for a more native and pollinator friendly garden. And a lot of that is talking about, this mindset of, well, habitat is created by these big preserves that people like the Regional Land Conservancy and Leelanau Conservancy are able to protect. But habitat can actually happen in your home as well. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit too. I've got a lot of these broken down to go through a little bit more detail. And then we do some work bees. So we do a garlic mustard work bee in each of our counties in May. We do baby's breath work bees through the summer out in Alberta. If you're interested in joining any of those, we should be getting those up on our website within the next month. Again, we do control, we do actual on the ground work. And so we run a crew usually every summer to do some cost share work for a variety of different species. And then we do a lot of outreach, because if you get down to the nitty gritty of it, at the baseline, getting the word out about invasive species is the best way to prevent invasive species from spreading, because you can't expect somebody to not plant something if they don't know that it could cause problems in the future. So knowledge is truly one of the best resources that we have. We do presentations for a variety of people. We used to have our outreach specialist used to say, anybody who will sit still long enough, we would give a presentation to. So we do a lot of that work. Breaking down those programs a little bit more. So our cost share management work, again, we focus on those invasive knotweeds, brownleaf bittersweet, and invasive Phragmites. You can see here these were a couple of our crew members from last year. We had Bree here and Carter down here. This was an old employee, Muriel, hiding in some, looks like some bittersweet there. And so we work with landowners to get them onto our treatment list and help, do some treatments every year. We do those for about $100 an hour, which helps kind of expand how many places we can get to with our grant funding, which we are about 90% grant funded. So we have to stretch our grants as far as we can to continue to support our work. If you're interested in learning more about it, you can go onto our website. We have a whole page for our cost share program. And we also do a lot of work with just if you're interested in learning more about how to manage a species, we also can help with that. We do at-cost survey work. So we try to run a species or a survey crew as often as we can. We're hoping we had one the last 2 years. We're hoping to have one again this year. But we do two different types of surveys. So we have our general invasive species surveys, where we can go through a whole property and we can look at what's growing there, mark it down, create some maps to give some guidance on where things are, and then provide a little bit of management help about things that you should prioritize and, species that are of the most concern, and then how to do that work. We also do some surveys for ornamental invasive species in landscaped areas. So that goes through our Go Beyond Beauty program. And that also comes with, a guidance of, here are all the species that we saw. Here's how you can get rid of them. And here's some suggestions of native species that you could plant instead. So we use both full-time staff and seasonal staff when we have them available. And we do these June through September. That's usually about the growing season. Technically, there are some stuff up in May, but not a whole lot. Most things start really popping up in June. And those are about $94 an hour. And we also have a whole page on that if you're interested in scheduling a survey. And so we're also doing hemlock woolly adelgid work, which if you're in Benzie County, you've probably heard a lot about, because Frankfort is a hotspot for hemlock woolly adelgid. It's a little weird for us because of how isolated all of these patches are. So we've got a spot down in Filer Township, which is right on the Mason-Manistee border. We've got the city of Frankfort, and then we've got all the way up in Leelanau Township, which is like Northport. So huge gaps between them, and each of those spots are pretty infested. So trying to work through that and hoping that they stay very isolated and there's not a whole lot that comes back in between. So we're continuing to do detection surveys for free of charge. However, due to grant funding, we have had to change our program. So In the past 2 years, we've been able to offer HWA treatments to people for free of charge. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. So we are starting to move to a cost share program for that as well. Participants in Benzie and Manistee counties are going to pay 25% of the work plus the chemical. And then treatments will remain free in Leelanau County because that is considered to be a leading edge. So the state is prioritizing that area. We do a lot of work with the state to make sure that we're following the state management guidelines, especially because the majority of this work is state funded. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, we also have a Hemlock Woolly Adelgid page on our website. And then lastly, our Go Beyond Beauty program. Again, this is a voluntary, non-regulatory program. We're not forcing anybody to make these changes. We talk with business owners to see if they're open to doing some of this stuff with us. And so we do have a lot of people who have joined us. Many of you may be familiar with like Black Cap Farms in Onekama, or if you've gotten native plants before through the district, that's likely come through Bird's Foot Native Nursery, which is based out of South Boardman. And so the real goal was to start having these conversations about some of that traditional landscaping and talking about how these species are actually, causing problems in the long run. And so we started that many years ago before I even started at ISN. And it started to evolve from there. And so we actually have started to go statewide. We've started to open up some hubs, usually through other CISMAs, but for the most part, just other partners who are very interested in having these conversations with people in their area as well. We have quite a few hubs open kind of more in the Southeast region. We've got one in the UP. Cake CISMA, who is the CISMA just to the north of us, is also a hub. And then we've got Central Michigan, which is kitty corner kind of to the southeastern corner of Grand Traverse County. They're also a hub for us as well. And so we kind of simplified the list. We used to have 33 different species that people in our service area, in order to be considered a Go Beyond Beauty participant, couldn't use or sell. We've narrowed that down to 14. And so we've been really working on that. And so this used to be that 33 species. And you can see, again, those arrows are pointing towards the species that are in our top 12. So there's a lot of overlap there. And it was part of why we realized that this was a program that we really should be looking at starting to do, because we were kind of dealing with the consequences of those old landscaping actions. And so we've been on expanding that. If you were curious, if you want to learn kind of more about the baseline of Go Beyond Beauty, this program actually did come out after some ISN employees read Doug Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home book, and talking about those how a lot of our landscapes are fragmented now. And again, going back to that, people can create habitat at home. And so kind of trying to connect those fragmented landscapes together to really help support the flora and fauna that really rely on having a large landscape. And so really what it comes down to is, ISN is composed of 6 people. Like 2 people are really dedicated to doing general invasive species work. We've got 2 people working on Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. We've got 1 person working on our Go Beyond Beauty program. We are, very busy all the time. And so really, again, that education comes back to being the most important thing, because helping other people understand what they can do to help, stop invasive species from spreading or help control invasive species is really important. And so the best thing that you can do is just doing basic decontamination. If you've ever attended an event we've been to, we often have what we call little mobile boot brushes to help brush your boots off. You've probably seen them at trailheads because they've started to expand a lot more. There was actually a study done back in 2010 looking at how well decontamination worked. And it could actually remove up to 88% of attached seeds and plant matter. So again, it takes like 5 minutes to brush your boots, if not even that. And so that is such a big thing that you can do, especially if you're moving between trails. I will throw out as well that decontamination doesn't necessarily just have to be your boots. If you're out camping, your equipment can also take seeds. If you're doing any kind of mountain biking, your bikes can also pick up seeds. If you're out walking your dog, dogs are very good at picking up seeds. So, kind of doing that decontamination, looking at the aquatic version of it as well. Fishing equipment, very good for moving pieces of plant material around, including waders. Waders are also very good at that. And probably most of you are familiar with Clean Drain Dry to clean off your boats between sites. Again, super quick, very good way to stop moving things around. And again, you don't need any prior knowledge outside of knowing that you could be accidentally transporting something. And so this is just showing some of the tools you can use to clean off some of your equipment. Best practice is before and after. If you can do at least one of them, you're doing great. We're very proud of you. If you're ever out doing any kind of driving on dirt roads, or if you do some off-roading, here are some really common places to look for plant material to get stuck in. And then I also have, again, these new possible regulations that are coming up, that prohibited species, that water hyacinth and water lettuce. 30 days after, if that order gets signed, 30 days after that is when those will no longer be available for sale. And so the reason that's kind of that restriction, the difference between the prohibited and the restricted species is that prohibited are typically not commonly found for sale. And so they can kind of be more firm about, the 30 days after it gets signed. With restricted species, these are very common species for sale, and so they get a phase out period. So if that order got signed, the restrictions wouldn't start until January 2028. Again, that request for comments is out. If you're interested in putting a comment in, if you go onto our Facebook or our Instagram, you'll be able to find that request for comment. And you can put that in. I believe it's open until early February. I can't remember the exact date that it opened, but it's 30 days after that initial date. I also wanted to throw out some new state programs that may be coming out in the next couple of years. So some of you may have seen this on our social media as well, as another request for comment. And so this was for certified weed-free products. So particularly out west has been doing this. Michigan is trying to take it and utilize it in this area. And so that would cover gravel, fill, mulch, and compost. And so the biggest two that you're probably thinking of are fill and mulch. If you've ever had anybody come and do work, if you've ever had a utility line, if you've ever had the road commission come, when they fill the dirt back in, what tends to come up is usually invasive species. And that's because the dirt that they're getting is full of those seeds. So this program is kind of working to make sure that that dirt is going to be free of those invasive species seeds. It starts with inspectors walking the perimeter of the property. They're checking the access road around all the buildings and around all of the storage areas for invasive species. There are 88 species that they're looking for, but the majority of those species are, like I said, this program was created out west. So the majority of those species live out west. We don't have suitable habitat for them here. They don't exist here, so nobody's expecting to find them, but the state of Michigan added on other ones to look for instead. And so if any of those species are found, they are going to put that producer in contact with the local CISMA to formulate a management plan. So while they can still sell products from other areas that don't have invasive species present, they can still sell the dirt that does have invasive species present. They just can't claim that it's clean fill. And so their product producers are planning to put a logo on their product that you can look for if you're looking to get that clean fill. And if you're interested in learning more, Vicky Swicky is the contact for that program. And then some resources, like I said, information, we are a hub of it. So we want to make sure that everybody gets it. Again, if you're looking for a CISMA outside of our 4-county service area, you can go to michiganinvasives.org. And also, again, with that whole, it's 6 of us for 4 counties and we're not everywhere. If you want to help with invasive species management, you can use the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network, called MISSIN. It is an MSU extension program, and it's a community science program. So anybody can report invasive species through MISSIN. And then if you report an invasive species, I actually get a report for that. I'll get an email that says, hey, this species was reported. And so if it's a species that we're actively, we actively do treatment for, or it's on our early detection list, we can reach out and we can, make contact with the landowner or the reporter, whichever one we need to get to really get moving on doing control for that species. Also, if you want to learn more about the different invasive species in this area, you can do their species information and training modules. So they've got really great pages that will explain to you how to identify them. They'll have management techniques on there as well. And then they have training modules that you can go through that'll test your knowledge of being able to identify that species. It is an app and you can use it on your browser. I do usually recommend using it on browser. The app can be a little funny sometimes. And then some other resources. Again, our website. Oh, I spelled it wrong. That is my bad. Habitat Matters. There's an R in Matters .org. That is our website. Again, the MISN website, the MichiganInvasives.org. The Midwest Invasive Plant Network has a lot of really great information about invasive species around the Midwest, including they have, if you've ever seen ISN's Plan Before You Plant booklet, which gives you some really common ornamental invasive species and native species you can replace them with. MIPIN did a bigger version of that for some of the woody invasive species, and their suggestions also include some non-invasive, non-native plants. Woody Invasives of the Great Lake, which have the best acronym of WIGGLE, has a lot of really great information about how to do woody invasive species management. MSU Extension and other universities and their extensions also have some really great information. And then if you're looking to get in contact with ISN, I know I threw out a lot of information about different things that we do. So here's some contact information. For anything with hemlock woolly adelgid, you can contact our HWA crew. Their group email is very long, and I apologize. So I also threw in Hannah's email. If you send it to Hannah, it will get to both of them, and it's much easier to type that in. If you're interested in cost share work or scheduling an at-cost survey, you can reach out to Luke. Go Beyond Beauty, native plant questions, scheduling at-cost survey for your landscaped areas, or any native plant recommendations. That is Shelley. And you can reach out to me with any general invasive species questions, management guidance, or identification questions. And then if you're just not sure who to reach out to, you can always give us a call. We'll get you to the right person. And I think that I even ended with a little bit of extra time for questions here.